So first of all, I think we need to appreciate the fact that there is going to be an increased requirement for compute capacity. Now, if we assume that increase is a factor of 10, and I'm not saying that that's an analysis that we've done, I'm saying if we assume that there's an increase of 10, the question is, will all that compute be hosted in central data centers or on-prem, or is there a space in between, which would be the near edge, if you like, or the telco edge, if you like, where that compute should optimally be processed? And we've put a few drivers for that. One of them we just discussed, the metaverse, obviously. There's consumer gadgets with device offloading. There's video and gaming and analytics. And there's obviously then the enterprise parts as well. So what we're really debating today when we talk about edge compute is, one, are there workloads that are not optimally hosted on the central data center, which will be the right two boxes, and also not optimally hosted on the left two boxes, which will be the on-premise, say the consumer's home or the enterprise's business location or factory, right? What are the drivers that are moving workloads away from the central data center, but not to premise, something in the middle, the near premises space? And within that specifically, since it is about hyperscalers, stuff that is pre-integrated X-as-a-service types of platforms, which would be a shared hyperscaler or a telecom operator edge compute infrastructure. So that's the space we're talking about today. And there's a wonderful report. It's free for download on our website that discusses all of these boxes and to get more insight in. But that's the one that we want to focus on today. And for the discussion, I want to have it structured into two parts. The first part is around the first question, which is, can hyperscalers provide the compute platform for carriers to produce their network services on, right? Can we have hyperscaler infrastructure there for mobile network services or fixed network services out in the country, somewhere in between on-prem, whatever on-prem means, and a central facility? The second question then will be around the hyperscalers' communication services and how they impact operators' communication services, okay? And let's do the first one first, because that'll lead us, I think, to an interesting set of discussions. And I want to take you on the journey of thinking here, because not everybody is obviously has gone along that journey. But the first thought is, networking obviously is, for the most part, a compute workload, right? It's containerized network functions or virtualized network functions in whatever shape or form. Operators today are not incentivized to provide compute capacity beyond what they need for their network functions themselves. That's an important thought. There's no reason why an operator should deploy more compute capacity out throughout the country than what their network functions need themselves, right? So there's a question. If they build the compute infrastructure, they will only build it for themselves. None of the other workloads we talked about earlier will find space on there, right? That would naturally lead to potential inefficiency. So 3 use cases like meta and cloud gaming could also require compute capacity throughout the country, probably at CU locations, but network operators' compute capacity would probably not foresee those incremental workloads. So the real question is, do operators' sourcing decisions influence the compute infrastructure, and does the compute infrastructure that operators would provide match total demand for compute out in the region, rather than only the demand of their own workloads, right? Can we have a compute infrastructure provided by hyperscalers that goes beyond only the network functions? And I want to give you the sourcing options, then we'll open the panel. Integrated, so today operators have a choice of providing or getting for their networks an integrated stack, and that's maybe an Ericsson stack, a Nokia stack, whatever, Huawei stack. And they can do so in various business models with CapEx and support, CapEx and managed service, or only a managed service. Or they can get a custom stack, which would be a separation of application and infrastructure, and then provide their services on that. That's the traditional. And what we're proposing is, and there's a big debate on this, right? This is the ORAN, virtualized, cloud native, whatever thing that you then need to integrate specifically for your own operating capabilities versus the traditional model that we've known for decades now. And what we're debating is there not a best of both, where We have a capable infrastructure provided as a managed service. We have applications, such as the CNFs and VNFs, integrated and optimized by the hyperscaler. And excess compute capacity is made available for the incremental workloads. And that's the first question. Can we have hyperscalers provide compute infrastructure for operators to run their services on? And I've broken this down into a bit of a list, and that's the list I want to discuss with you about. And I'll keep that slide up because that's the set of questions for the first part of the discussion. Just running through them. Do use cases exist? Do you see that the central data center is sufficient? Does performance of general purpose hardware, is that sufficient? Are accelerators available or not available? And are we power efficient? And do we need to capture, is it about capturing value from client use cases, etc.? I want to open with you, Djordje, on the first question. What do you think? Do you think that we're going to see use cases that require such infrastructure?
Definitely. Yeah, so the way we see basically metaverse is the succession of the mobile internet, right? So it's a new generation of internet, just more immersive, right? But what it does basically, it creates a lot of compute workload requirements, right? And there are really two trends coming out here, right? You have a CDN network which provides the contents with peers into the service provider networks and end up with the devices, right? So starting with the devices, what happens is that new applications with the VR and AR is really stressing the processing options on the device side first, right? So if you see, we discussed yesterday about avatars, photorealistic avatars, more concrete resolution scenes. This will all actually stress the devices from battery performance and form factors, heat dissipation is becoming a problem. So there's a processing which actually first gets offloaded from the device outside of the device, either into the user edge or to the service provider edge, right? And then on the other side, on the content side, you have basically data centers where applications run. And all these new use cases, especially multi-concurrent VR spaces where you have virtual spaces with multiple people from different physical spaces interacting in the same user space, right? They're geographically distributed, so they're very complex processing. How do you actually render all these scenes? Where does it happen? Because of the latency, if everything's running on DC, that's actually not making the requirement. So there is a push to also move the data center processing closer to the edge. So kind of faults from both sides, right? Faults from the device side, faults from the data center side. So the edge will be the place where more action will happen for sure from compute. Now, what's the exact architecture? How do you actually come around that? How do you make a synergy between compute architecture and the network CSP architecture? Is open questions. Really, today if you're talking about next generation of internet, metaverse being a new generation of internet is basically, what is really winning about internet today is it's decentralized, disaggregated, nobody owns it, it's interoperable, right? So you have basically these CDN networks peering into specific locations in the CSP network, right? The peering means we have two peers which are connected and see the value of connecting together. So now with the emergence of new networks, especially with the 5G, with the full CAPS, basic separation of control and user plane, with the UPF now being moved closer to the user, that opens up a new peering opportunities where now this compute capacity can peer interconnect directly to the CSP. Now, where is it hosted and all that? That's a separate discussion. I mean, that's something that we're really open to discuss with the wide industry here. It's a starting open discussion.
Fantastic. So your answer in a nutshell is yes, there's going to be demand, and two, I need it closer than the central data center. If that is true, let me ask, how would you architect the network to cater for the use cases that, for instance, Facebook is putting forth?
I mean, first of all, the beauty of Switzerland is we are the edge. We are at the edge of innovation, and we're so small that even the central data center is the edge, kind of. So within mobile, for example, we do have an average latency of 8 milliseconds. So I guess that's something most players in the US cannot even think about, providing edge compute. Other than that, I do believe that we will have co-locations of different workloads. We do today. We have 12 data centers within Swisscom. We're not only an operator, we're a big ICT company. So we do cater other workloads than network workloads. What nevertheless we do see is that for the networking workload as of today, we use dedicated infrastructures. Why is that? Because we have different requirements. This is a hurdle we will overcome as an industry. We're working on it. And there are benefits in overcoming that in order to really use the full scalability among different workloads. Nevertheless, does that need to be, and that was one of the questions you raised early on, does that need to be Swisscom providing that capability? Pretty much, I don't think so, that it has to be Swisscom. This is why, for example, and you, who has been there yesterday, has seen that on the slide of Rui Frazao, this is why we're working with AWS, because there are some benefits in hyperscalers that, although we're the biggest player in Swisscom, we're not big enough to have the same capacity or the same demands to really use and provide elasticity the way they can. And if you look at, for example, networking workloads, a day's curve starts in the morning, slowly picking up demand with a first peak at lunchtime, then getting back down and getting back up in the evening. That's what elasticity is all about, right? And what we do today, we dimension our data centers for high load, high peak time. So it's not efficient. So yes, I think there's a gain as an industry to cooperate on this.
So if we compare Switzerland and say you're an 8 millisecond country, Mr. Butz, is Germany also have any chance at becoming an 8 millisecond country?
Absolutely, yes. It will not be so easy like in Switzerland because we don't have so many mountains that we could put base stations on and valleys.
We don't have any valleys either.
Anyhow, yeah. No, of course we will go to that route. I mean, we are talking about, at the end of the day, it's the first target to reach this 10 milliseconds. That's somehow, I don't know why it's 10, because it sounds probably as figure better than 8 or 12 or whatever. But that's somehow a target where we see that's necessary for most of the edge use cases. In the long term, and I guess all we are talking here about is evolution. In the long term, of course, I guess 10 milliseconds is still too long. Mm-hmm. If you really think about, real life, metaverse, whatever use cases, I guess we have even to come lower, because with 10 milliseconds, maybe you still have, as a person, the feelings is 1/100th part of a second. I mean, you know it from sports, there is a slightly delay, a slightly difference. But that's future talk. Maybe coming back, are there use cases? Absolutely, yes. But I guess they will also involve in terms of complexity. So the big question is, what is edge computing? Edge computing is pretty much the same like Industry 4.0. It's everything and it's nothing. So, but I guess as a starting point, what we see with edge computing, especially all these private 5G networks, which have an on-premise edge or on-premise cloud or however you name it, I guess that's the first step, especially these industrial applications. The second step will then be also getting these industrial applications away from these closed networks, but still as industrial applications somehow as a closed group. And the third part is then, how to say, an open edge where you don't know the participant. And then it's becoming really complex, which means if you talk about all this self-driving cars and this automated traffic management, you don't know who is driving there or who will be there tomorrow. And you can't exclude the Fiats because they are Italian cars and you don't know them from intelligent traffic management in Germany. So I guess the complexity is growing over time. But of course, for the next 5-10 years, we will see there a huge evolutionary step. So from the use cases, absolutely. So maybe not even the metaverse as in the next 2-3 years, but later on. Let's see. To be honest, I don't know the speed you are working on it, but it will come definitely. So in terms of infrastructure, I guess also there, we talk about evolution. So if we talk about the evolutions that applications which are today in the cloud are going to an edge, at the end of the day, the edge solution will be the regional cloud or local cloud, which means the hyperscaler, of course, have their huge benefit bringing their today cloud use cases and edges. So I guess there will be a lot of partner concepts with hyperscalers, but also we as operators will have separate concepts, especially talking about international usage. If we open our networks, of course, also for Switzerland cars, so why not?
Okay.
So it will be a mixed solution.
So it seems we agree that there are going to be workloads that require compute capacity closer to where the demand is. If that is true, today the ETSI standard for mobile edge compute determines that the appliance for the network functions and the appliance for the customer workloads need to be two separate appliances, right? That to me would foster a model where operators would deploy compute capacity for their networking infrastructure, and then someone else is going to deploy incremental compute capacity for customer. I think that's inefficient in design. Do you think that the performance of general purpose hardware, say at the CU locations, so not the radio processing, which is probably going to be more integrated, or the performance of general purpose hardware with accelerators is sufficient to cater to networking workloads and then incrementally also customer workloads, or do you think it needs to be two different setups? I'll come to you in a second. Mr. Butz first.
So maybe if I step there in, eat your own dog food. So if you want to offer edge services for your customers, it makes, of course, also sense to bring your own network services step by step also into this edge or to cloudificate the network services. Are all network services able to be brought to the cloud is a different question, but of course it will happen step by step. That of course these data centers will be reused and used for as well internal as also for external services. So I guess it's not even a question out of my perspective. So, but
I completely agree. And yesterday on my slides there was one bullet saying we're missing cloud nativeness in networking services, and one reason for that is we didn't standardize the way. And what you just let's say cited, having two appliances doesn't really cater the idea of a cloud. A cloud doesn't know the notion of an appliance, right? It's a workload, and whether that's running on the same computer or in two different computes, nobody knows, nobody cares. So from that perspective, I don't believe in that.
I think it's really hard. I thought this was going to be a more controversial panel, but we all agree violently. That's good. That's good. So we agree that what the ETSI standard is putting forth is maybe not efficient, right? Now, exactly, I was going to come to you. How would you, as if you want to deploy metaverse into these distributed locations in, say, 50 or 100 relevant countries first or initially, and then grow beyond, obviously, you're going to have a lot of operators to deal with and their specific infrastructures. How do you, as somebody who could put workloads there, want to interact? What's your requirements?
Yeah, again, coming back to my previous point, the way we look at the metaverse is really evolution of the decentralized internet and disaggregated internet, right? So we already have interconnect points between our data, content networks and the carriers, right? They just operate at the higher distance from the users, right? But as the CSP networks evolve, there is more MAC options, more UPF opportunities to stream into the network, then the CDN networks will also extend. So we're seeing basically this interconnect model appearing to extend deeper to the closer to the user.
Sure, but I was referring to the complexity of having each operator build their own environment and provide that under their own conditions and their own terms, etc. That to me sounds like it would be hugely complex, especially if there is an alternative, which hyperscalers have shown in compute, to provide a globally uniform compute infrastructure that you can deploy services on. For you, extending the CDN model, negotiating with every carrier seems to be more complex than, for instance, providing that edge compute capacity for the mobile networks in the first place, or asking for a standardized platform across operators that you can deploy your use cases on. Where are you on that scale?
That's a very complex question, and we welcome further discussion on that, because there's a lot of security-related issues and then the ownership and all that, which is really, really sensitive. And I think I can see value in both options, right? And something that I think we as an industry should discuss more. How does it actually converge? What's the way to actually enable faster evolution of that? Having a common platform where you can more easily port stuff, develop, that definitely sounds right? Just the devil is in details, right? Who actually maintains that?
So in your sourcing options, if we were to think about deploying such a compute infrastructure that is now multi-purpose, I would imagine that you have an option to build it yourself based on OpenStack and Red Hat. I would imagine you have an option to say, hey, dear Ericsson, you build it for me. You probably have an option to say, I want it from Facebook, and Facebook shall provide, and I will be an OPEX tenant on that. Or I go with AWS or Microsoft or whoever to deploy. What are your considerations in that option space of sourcing alternatives? If you can share it, I know it's a big question.
All valid options. I guess we will look into that from different angles. First of all, I think the key angle we're looking into always is serving our customers' needs. So we really take a lot of efforts in order to optimize our customer performance, which is a daily job, and that whatever sourcing option we take, this needs to integrate quite well. So what does it translate into? We don't need a sourcing supplier. We need a partner who's working with us on that. So that's the key ingredient for that. And along that lines, I can imagine a couple of sourcing options. But other than that, this won't work.
What would be the most relevant criteria that you would expect the partner to adhere to or work against? What are you looking for?
It sounds very trivial, but if I really have the feeling we have a common purpose around our customers, then I guess everything else will fall into place. And although it sounds trivial, this is not that often the case.
Very true. Anything you'd like to add? What would be your sourcing considerations?
I guess it will become a little bit boring, but I fully agree. So at the moment, all these options are valid, and we are looking, of course, on all sides, and it's something we will not do alone, because at the end of the day, especially if we talk about this metaverse, whatever topics, I guess it's not designed for Switzerland or Germany or Austria or whatsoever, but at the end of the day, we need a kind of a global environment, or at least a European-wide environment.
Yes.
And therefore, I guess it's not one operator going away and the rest will follow. It's a finding process. And this is still ongoing.
So this is interesting. So you are actually saying that operators in multiple geographies, at least the dimension of Europe, need to converge on the idea of how to build it.
I guess that a lot of applications which are coming up with Edge will not be on national level.
Yes.
Especially if we talk about whatever, gaming, metaverse, whatever topics. So I don't know your roadmap, but I don't believe that metaverse is developing something for Austria as a single place, for example. Or therefore, at the end of the day, it will come to an European-wide or global solution. If it's a standardized process which will take probably a little bit longer than expected, or probably not, but at the end of the day, I guess the market will force us all to find there a common solution.
I would agree, but I still want to challenge the point. Because your suggestion is operators coming together. Now, operators haven't been very successful in coming together and agreeing on many things quickly and efficiently, and then it's always kind of difficult. Why should an operator do that? Why not have a hyperscaler do that?
Agree to disagree. If we look on the edge trials we are performing, at the moment we are working, for example, closely together with Deutsche Telekom. For this, well, this is traffic management, so you need to integrate the different cards. So, of course, the carriers are also working together. Because there will be a lot of applications which will run in one network. So, which means you as operator sell to a customer this access for his application in your network. But a lot of use cases, and I would say most of the use cases will not be national anymore, which means you have to have some inter-carrier agreements anyhow. You need the roaming agreements, or you need the local breakouts for foreign applications in your country. So,
okay. So, Djordje, I could imagine that one of the big concerns of operators is, for their network functions, is power efficiency. Right? And that's power efficiency, and we've had the discussion extensively yesterday as well. It's power efficiency not only on the radio part, which I think is clear, but also on the baseband part, or the CU locations, if you like. The concern is, and I understand that, if as an operator you want to, or you have to go green and CO2 neutral, then obviously you want this to be as power efficient as you possibly can. It's a key criteria to protect our environment and also to be economically attractive, even more so in increasing power costs. How does Facebook work on being power efficient in such distributed infrastructures?
Yeah, so we work with our partners basically to deliver most efficient, most powerful efficient solutions in this space, right? So maybe a question about whether the GPUs are efficient enough. It's good because they're flexible, gets you going, but is that the best bang for buck, right, in terms of power efficiency? There's always a trade-off between flexibility and power, right? And if you follow how disaggregated RAN, for example, evolved, right? It started with separating the radios from the baseband, DU and CUs, and then first order whole stack would run on the general purpose processor, right, CPUs, right? But then there's more and more silicon coming into the RAN as well, on the open RAN as well, where you're basically taking some functions which are well-defined, well-described, especially on layer 1, and you're creating basically accelerated cards, right? So you're actually leaving the flexibility where it needs to be and basically hardening something. So there'll be some process where, at least in my mind, this will actually go through a process of discovery and hardening and eventually become more efficient. Yeah.
And is power efficient? Do you design your applications to be power efficient? Is that a criteria?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so we share interests on this topic.
Absolutely, that's a big KPI for us. Is always the power efficiency.
How, Mr. Düsener, how do you look at power efficiency in a mobile network?
That's one of our key goals. That's one of our strategic goals as Swisscom. So we have the strategy goal of being carbon-free in scope 3 by 25, so that's quite close. So based on that, this is why, and this is what our discussion was about yesterday, O-RAN is an interesting concept, but we are not the first users. It's rare that we are not the first users of new technologies, but in that context, it doesn't fit from a quality perspective yet, nor from a power consumption perspective. So, and we increased that viewpoint even more. So in the past, it was much more about performance, meeting customer needs, but even customers demand and look for how do you produce that. And therefore, from our perspective, we're now getting much more into balance of performance versus being power efficient. And that will be an increasing demand. And even looking forward, I just said that we do imagine that we will utilize, for example, hyperscalers in order to offload certain workloads. Power efficiency, i.e. usage of compute, is something we will pay for. So we'll ask our suppliers who provide software to be efficient in how they utilize compute, storage, whatever, and therefore utilize energy. There's a correlation to cost to that.
Very, very clearly there is. Mr. Butz, if we take the idea of power efficiency forward and we say we need that for the network functions, do you think that is possible to do if you also at the same time have compute infrastructure that may be running idle? How do you optimize power efficiency? How is that important?
I would really also see it in the big perspective. I guess like most of the operators, I guess Telefónica is quite a front runner. We want to become carbon-free and green. So we are looking for absolute green energy, and of course, looking at the costs of power, we are trying everything to reduce our power needs for power or the electricity. So to be honest, if we are now screwing down, dimming the light of the servers in the night, to be honest, I don't know. What I know is that as a general target, of course, we try to reduce it as much as possible. And if we look also on the mobile side, 5G will produce data with a lot less energy compared to 3G or 4G.
Yes.
So I guess all these evolutionary steps already include power efficiency.
I think it's going to be it's a big theme in 5G. It's going to be even a bigger theme for 6G, to have further work on power efficiency, so power per bit per second, if you wish. I'm moving to the last question on this. If we imagine a multi-purpose compute infrastructure deployed throughout the country for the use cases that we painted out, how do you imagine that the collaboration with, say, a hyperscaler in this space would be, given that the hyperscaler may go after the customer workloads and therefore take the margins generated? But I could imagine that you also would want to be in that business providing services to customers. How can that be structured?
There are different models we are thinking about. So one is clear because the question is need to capture value from use cases. I mean, we are not an NGO. We are somehow companies who try to earn some money. So the answer is yes, of course. So different ways, of course. One is who is bringing in, for example, the customer. The customer who is doing the sales, who is bringing in the customer for all these new use cases. He's, of course, the one who is getting a certain part of the margin. If the hyperscalers require access to our network with this low latency, it has a certain value, and value could come with a cost. So we can discuss here a lot of models, and we are discussing a lot of models from revenue share in the cloud to, I don't know, access costs or whatsoever. So, but the answer is, of course, we want to earn some money because we see this at the end of the day. Edge computing is the answer to the promises we gave is 5G. Therefore, yes.
So you see the hyperscaler as a potential customer of infrastructure that you provide. That's.
Let's say we see the hyperscaler as a potential partner. If he's providing the infrastructure in our network, or if we are providing the infrastructure and he's putting on his software or whatsoever, all models are open and thinkable. What makes sense in a kind of partnership like that? So I guess what we really have to have in our minds is we don't talk about their customer-supplier connection anymore. We talk about partnerships. We talk about jointly developing the market here.
Yes.
And in this joint developing, we will also find a good way of, how to say, sharing revenues or margins or whatsoever.
Mr. Düsener, at the risk of you saying you fully agree, but what's your view?
You see me smiling because I think we have that discussion every 2, 3, 5 years. Will we be a big dump pipe, right? A bit pipe. I think I had the first discussions 20 years ago when it was about, oh, Nokia and so on will dominate us with their new phones and whatever. Guess who's not there anymore? And so I think this is one side of the story. The other is the hyperscalers. I mean, that's the other part. I guess they could face the same questions, and they do, and they have answers towards that. Are they only a dumb infrastructure provider? No, they are not. And I think the model we're working on and we're working with, and we're doing it already today, is competition. And that's happening with us. So we do have virtual operators on our networks. That's competition. And we benefit from selling infrastructures, and they're benefiting from our infrastructure and making us, getting customers of ours. So that's mutual benefit as well as competition. The same applies on hyperscalers. I mean, AWS is running Netflix, and they do have Prime. Same service, same infrastructure. So I guess that's part of the game. And yes, there's no easy answer in the sense of that's the model. It's black or white. It needs to be seen who provides which benefit, especially from a customer perspective. That can be marketing, sales. That can be optimizing performance. As of today, for example, a phone call via WhatsApp doesn't at all match our quality. So if you want to have good quality, better integrate with us, for example. And then we provide value.
There you have it. So if Facebook were to imagine a world where we have multi-purpose compute infrastructure out there, then you would be potentially one of the customers of that infrastructure, sharing with operators in one shape or form. How would you look at that relationship of monetizing and capturing value from Meta and sharing that potentially with the infrastructure provider or with the operator?
I think I would agree with Martin and Mark here. I would agree with Martin and Mark here. It's all about partnership. We don't view this as a kind of customer relationship, a transactional relationship. It's about coming to the common terms and what makes sense to everyone, right? That's the best way to look at it.
Thank you. That is I would like to close the first part of the discussion here, but if there are immediate questions from the audience to the panel on the topic of how can the network evolve and have a multi-purpose compute infrastructure deployed in the RAN, hosting both network functions and customer workloads, I want to open to the panel. Any immediate questions? No, then we will move to the second part of the debate. And again, I will try to frame the discussion a bit and give you a bit of the scope. But hyperscalers do offer communication services, right? And we are aware that carriers are, well, at least in some markets, considering and have considered to be separated into netcos and servcos. Here we're talking about the service companies, so the service part of network operators, and clearly hyperscalers communication services are competing in that space. So to make that more tangible, messaging is going in the person-to-person or application-to-person space over to WhatsApp, to Teams, to Facebook messages, to iMessages, to various UCaaS players, etc. And the other forms, frankly, are declining. International voice is obviously migrating over to the same platforms. National voice is shifted, and we'll have the quality discussion in a minute about this, over to WhatsApp, Teams, and so on. Video calling is clearly migrating also to hyperscalers, service platforms, and even the bare data transport, especially for the international segments, is also migrating towards cloud networking or cloud WAN type of services. So is it true that 3GPP communication services that we have defined in the past, that these services are actually being substituted by more convenient or easier to use or better quality possibly, don't know, but by hyperscaler and UCaaS services? And is it then also true that customer experience for a carrier's customer very much depends on collaborating in the services space not only with 3GPP providers, but also with the services that hyperscalers provide. And there's a few questions that I'll keep up on the screen again, and I'll walk through them briefly. Are hyperscalers and UCaaS players actually a target segment? Should operators work proactively with them and potentially establish a proposition and channels in order to secure a competitive advantage because the Teams or the WhatsApp works better on your network than on your competitor's network? In that context, is net neutrality a blessing or irrelevant or a problem? Will hyperscalers dry up communication on the international connectivity side by providing cloud connectivity and Cloud WAN? Will hyperscalers provide their services inside the telcos' networks? So are we going to see a WhatsApp and a Teams service be deployed into the telcos' network? And will standalone ServCos, or how will standalone ServCos differentiate and compete on communication services tomorrow? Again, I think a fairly complex set of questions. I think they're all top of mind. But Mr. Butz, I'd like to start with you on this journey.
Yeah.
Do you think that hyperscaler that you should set up a specific value proposition and collaboration and channel to work with hyperscalers on communication services?
It's a quite interesting question. I will return the question. Who of you know WhatsApp SIM? Okay, so we have 2 or 3 of the younger generation here in the room. So WhatsApp SIM is a service provider based on the Telefónica network with exactly the propositions that we say, also if your data volume is gone, so if you spend your data volume, you still can use WhatsApp. So there is already a cooperation with WhatsApp, for example, since, let me lie, 2-3 years even. And of course, the target group is more in the, in the younger sector. But yes, I guess we will see this kind of cooperations.
So this solution that you mentioned, I think, is probably on the tariff. I don't know it, that's why I'm asking. It's on the tariff level, right?
It's pretty much on the tariff level, but it's a partnership with WhatsApp, for example, yes.
Right. So if we were to think that further, would you then say, well, in my partnership with the hyperscalers communication platforms, I will need to also ensure that their quality is good and maybe even exceptional in front of the customer, or do you see them as competing with the 3GPP services?
I guess it's the same story like before with the coexistence and competition. Let's name it that way. So in terms of quality, what we see of this OTT services, and that's pretty much what we are talking about, is that the quality of them is not so far away from our quality. Could be different in Switzerland, but what we see, especially as they are purely on data services, especially on the international calls, they're on the same quality level. If we talk about international calls, national, I guess we are still better, especially with VoLTE and now with 5G and this voice over new radio, we will still have an advantage again. But on the other side, I guess the quality we see there is still for the end customer pretty much sufficient. So I don't think that you really notice as end customers there are huge quality gaps. So, brutally honest.
Mr. Düsener, how do you think about quality?
Yeah, we strive for highest levels of quality. I guess that's what Swiss stands for, right? Be it watches, chocolate, or mobile communications. To answer that, first of all, I think on our case, it's really a big difference. So it does make a difference. It does make a difference, by the way, I'm commuting between Germany and Switzerland. It does make a difference where I make a call. And apart from that, whatever we do, the customer is at the center of what we do. So we really try to optimize his and her performance of services. And for example, we're already working quite close with them, with hyperscalers, content providers, you name it. For example, only 50% of the traffic is coming from outside of our network because we're doing a lot of peering and caching to optimize that performance. And that's, let's say, a more static approach. With new things like metaverse, this needs to become more dynamic. Nevertheless, the principle, the underlying principle that we want to optimize our customer experience for the sake of the customer is still valid. And the second part is it's customer demand that we want to fulfill. We are an ICT player. We're serving them with Teams today. We're serving them with Ring Central if they want to. Or we're serving them with our voice solutions. And there's no one size fits all. And that applies to, yes, we need to find partnerships, we need to find revenue sharing models, or whatever it is, in order to fill customer demands.
Since you made the point that there is a big difference in Switzerland between the voice service you provide and the experience customers would get for, say, using a voice call on WhatsApp, is that good or bad? Do you like that differentiation, that you can set a mark saying Swisscom services is also good? Or would you be of the position to say, look, if my customers want to use WhatsApp, we will invest into making the WhatsApp experience equivalent with my own service, as long as it's different from, say, your competitors in the market?
I mean, there are reasons why people are using WhatsApp to call. For example, my younger daughter is always calling me in WhatsApp, and I then close the call and call her back in order to understand her. But it's her way, it's her center of usability. And if there's a value from a customer perspective in that context, it's her messaging communication context that she prefers, then in an ideal scenario, we will get to an agreement where we jointly optimize that performance. And yes, then it needs to be somehow an offer we are part of. We need to find an agreement because we will bring in something to the table, right? To optimize that from a customer perspective. And yes, we're working on models like these.
Now, since we talked about WhatsApp, and WhatsApp is one of Facebook's services, how do you look at this? What I heard Mr. Düsener say is, we are happy for our customers to get the best experience, whether this is on our voice service or whether this is on the WhatsApp voice service. But if it is on the WhatsApp services, it needs to be partnership, and that means Swisscom is ready to invest, but there's also got to be some form of value flowing back to Swisscom if they improve service quality from you. What's your view? Is that important?
I don't know how much of this is known, but oftentimes we talk about data analytics programs that we have within Meta, where we basically observe the quality of experience as seen from the top from our applications, because we get to see how our users are actually enjoying all these networks, right? And we have partnership programs with more than 200 carriers of the world, where we actually work proactively to solve and improve this performance, where we share the information, it's called the Network Insights program, right? And purely we're doing this, there's no value exchange, apart from improving the connectivity for our users, because for us, that's the most important thing.
I understand that is happening on the technical level, where you're helping network operators improve the network performance, and I think that's a well-known, well-established service. I'm talking about money. Because operators will not have a monetary benefit for improving well, maybe that's unfair, not a direct monetary benefit for improving quality on hyperscalers communication services, as opposed to investing into their own. The point is, does the partnership not also require money to flow?
Well, my opinion here is that it's really driven by user satisfaction, and if they have a customer base that really wants to use WhatsApp, you cannot go against that, because then users will move to another competitive network where those services do perform well. So you cannot artificially dictate the services that users will finally use, right? Because users are free in every country in the world. You have competition, right? So it has to be market-driven. And finally, users should be benefiting from that.
Mr. Düsener.
And that works both ways, right? I mean, they can use either Teams or another messenger or WhatsApp, and that either integrates better or worse. But as I've said, our belief is to enable the best user experience on the way the users want, on users' choice. And if you look onto, and getting back to the big and dumb bit pipe, it's not easy. It's nothing that everybody is able to do to optimize performance. We noticed that. Otherwise, a Connect test wouldn't be necessary anymore. That's a value that customers really take serious. For example, we measure NPS, as most people do, and we measure a network NPS, which is quite high in our case. And we even measure what are the most important services to have an influence on that. And guess what? By far, it's voice calls.
Yes.
And we're talking about metaverse, video download, and whatever. The most relevant use case from a customer perspective on mobile is having voice calls. So there is a value from a customer perspective, and if there's value, we're able to support our partners to capture that.
So, Mr. Butz, if we think that operators are going to collaborate with hyperscalers communication services to improve customer experience, is that if that is the aspiration, the net neutrality question comes in immediately, right? Because you're going to work with 1 or 2, maybe 3, but not 50, right? Is net neutrality a problem? Is it irrelevant? Or is it actually a good thing because it gives you more freedom in decisions of who you want to work with?
I guess network neutrality has 2 sides. I mean, we learned now that some tariffs from our competitors were stopped because of violating network neutrality, which means somehow there is a certain interest of the carriers to have network neutrality or to come away from it. On the other side, if we have a neutral network or network neutrality, of course, if we increase the quality of the data services in our network, we automatically increase also the quality of the hyperscaler services, which are running on top of this data service. So it has 2 sides at the end of the day.
But that would be windfall, right? So windfall benefits, you improve data overall, everybody gets better quality and therefore the experience, but you wouldn't actually do it application specific.
I guess at the moment we are not allowed to.
I'm aware. That's why I'm asking. Is that good or bad? Or where are you? Would you want to be able to?
As it's not allowed, we are not thinking, or I personally was not thinking inside it. So okay. I skip the question.
Okay, let me move to the next question on this chart. For international connectivity, obviously O2 is operating globally and with Telefónica in multiple geographies. If we see that compute workloads are moving to the cloud, and if we see that voice communication can also be transported by the cloud, is it true that the international connectivity services are actually being dried up by hyperscalers?
I guess we have to distinguish there. The cloud is not transporting data at the end of the day. The connection to the cloud is transporting the data. And what we see is that we have a huge increase of traffic on these international IPX connections. Absolutely, yes. But out of my experience, these international connections are driven by us as operators, which means this, this global international backbone, this IPX connections from one country to the other is at the moment a pure operator thing. Of course, the traffic is increasing. Of course, maybe the clouds are synchronizing in different countries, but at the end of the day, I guess the most of the traffic flow is still on the operator side and will also stay there. Because at the end of the day, this traffic connection as an operator is a carrier topic.
So you think it will also stay there, despite, say, Microsoft's and Google's and Amazon's aspirations and also actions to actually own and build that infrastructure themselves?
I guess that's then again a topic of a commercial decision. Is it, how to say, commercially interesting to build it by yourself? What is the value if you can use also an existing infrastructure? What are the price points, the discussions? So I guess that's a commercial topic which must be discussed there.
From a point of view of Meta or Facebook, what's your view on your aspirations for your international connectivity?
Well, everything we do is international, right? And we just said we're not building products for a specific country, and that's how the metaverse will evolve, right? So the whole internet backbone is very important, but we do invest a lot in infrastructure on our side, right? So provide those caching opportunities deeper inside our partner networks. So that has been our focus from beginning, right? So we don't want to put the burden on the international backbone, so we come closer to where data is consumed by our users. And that also has common interest with our partners on the MNO side.
We have another 5 minutes on the panel, so I want to move to the next question, then also open to the audience again. The first one, will hyperscalers provide your communication services inside telcos networks? So can you imagine to have your communication services not be provided on servers in your domain, but on servers that are sitting within the telcos networks?
That's something that we need to discuss because it's a very complex topic, right? And it has a multiple facets. And again, there are a lot of challenges with that shared compute, right? We mentioned some of them earlier, you know, security, upgrades, ability to scale, and definitely something that we would like to discuss with our partners moving forward. In general, the way we look at this is that to some extent it's good for best scale of internet, as a metaverse, as a next generation internet, is to enable that independent scaling, right? And then you come to certain interconnect points where you can actually traverse closer to the user. That, in some sense, enables both sides to scale and grow in disaggregated fashion, yet in the interoperable manner.
So on the last question, Mr. Düsener, how can service companies differentiate in the world where services are being provided by hyperscalers? And what's your view on differentiation going forward?
I guess principally we serve different purposes, and we have different means. I mean, from a customer perspective, once again, what they are looking for is a trustful partner. And Swisscom, one of our key values is being trustworthy. With our newest portfolio of tariffs, so to say, for example, there's built-in internet security. We ensure that you won't get on a page with a Trojan horse. We ensure that you don't get malware distributed via SMS. So that service we offer to our customers. Can others do that? Yes, they can. But we're trusted from a customer perspective. We do have service centers, we do have shops. So you can physically interact with us as well as via other means, digital. So I guess that's a value from a customer perspective. If that's not, we will change, we will adapt. But so far it is. And that's a value we can provide to our partners as well. So this is not it's not an either or, it's not black and white. But I do see that from today's perspective, yes, there is a clear value that our customers see fulfilled via us or from us, beyond pure connectivity, although it's at highest performance.
Mr. Butz, how can operators differentiate on their communication services?
I guess I can agree again. One is really this long-term trustful relationship, especially as we are offering, at the end of the day, faces to the customer, really persons in the shops, in customer service centers. So there is this high trust and reliability because there is someone felt that there is someone sitting on the other side of the table. So this trust is one part. The second is that we are, of course, interested. I guess also the other service companies are interested, but we take it quite serious to have this long-term relationship with our customers. Because at the end of the day, the customers are the ones paying for the service. And this means we are as fair as possible with our customers. So we try to avoid that there are some viruses, malware, whatever, spammed over our network as good as possible. We try to avoid all this, how to say, daily anger for the end customers and provide the service there on a really, also with our end customers. I mean, this word partnership, I guess we used it now every minute, so 60 times. So, but also with our end customers, we want to have this long-term relationship. And I guess that's the big difference.
Thank you. I think we covered a lot of ground today. Any remaining questions from the audience before we close the panel? If not, I think there's a lot of partnership discussions that are commencing. Thank you for being here and walking through, I think, a fairly complex set of questions that are emerging. I hope we could provide a few answers and a few viewpoints to the audience on those topics. Thank you for being with me on the panel.
Wow.